Welcome back to the Undrafted podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Erdman, here alongside my co partner, Maddie Ice Matthew L. Arnold. And boys, here today, it is NFL Draft Eve. So, one of our favorite days of the year, as we talked about on our last episode. We did have a little bit of a break here, guys. So we appreciate everyone hanging in there. Had some things come up. We wanted to kind of go through this in about a three-part special, but we're just going to jam pack it here today. We gave you our insight on those top 10 picks in our last episode. In those top 10, as we talked about it at length in our previously, very interesting to see where a lot of these guys fall and to see as we get to that 11th pick, who's still going to be on the board, who's going to be available. And I still think there's a lot of intrigue because I think there's a lot of depth as far as, really talented players, very intriguing players in this draft. So I'm really excited. It doesn't have the quarterbacks, right? So I think some people tend to look at this draft and maybe it's not what some other years were. And I would disagree a bit. I think only in the regards of quarterback is there of less interest. And I know next year everyone's looking forward and you're going to have a plethora of 5, 6 quarterbacks. Maybe they're talking about going the first round, where this year you're probably looking at one or maybe two. I think ultimately there probably will be two, but in my opinion, probably only should be one. But there's still a lot of intrigue. I think as you go through pick 32, I think there's going to be a lot of trades. I think there's going to be some crazy trades and deals done. So it is going to be all over the place as we get to tomorrow. But we're going to jump right into this because we're going to cover 11 to 32. Me and Matt today on our projections. Again, this is a kind of a what they should do. We're giving our thoughts. It's a mock. So players we've already mocked somewhere else based upon if we were in the GM shoes, who would we pick? Once we assign a player to a team, they're off the board. And we go from there. So a bunch of big names already off of that top 10, which has all the hype, all the buzz, all the talk that's going on. But so if you've just been watching the mainstream shows and you're getting most of your information really on those top players in the top 10, I think this is a little bit more insightful and I think also very intriguing because now we're going to start talking about the rest of those guys that have a good possibility going in the first round and what the rest of these teams outside of the top 10, especially if they don't trade up to get into that top 10, what they're going to do. So let's start here at 11 with the Miami Dolphins. And we're not projecting trades, but we might talk about some teams that we think could do a trade. I think the Dolphins, honestly, Matt, really could probably go in a lot of ways, right? They're a bad team. They lost Jalen Phillips in the offseason, who was one of their better pass rushers as well. Of course, they bring in Malik Willis, which I like as a nice move. I really like what we saw in Malik Willis in Green Bay, especially last year. I think getting rid of Tua's talented, but he's too injury prone. He also at times has stinkers of games. So I think Malik Willis is an upgrade. I don't know if he's an upgrade as far as pure talent, but I think he's an upgrade just in overall the position and see what you got with him. And he got a pretty good deal, but I think you could play him for a year. And like I said, I don't think this offense is going to be that dynamic. So you've got to do some evaluation there and I keep that in mind and then see where he is. And, maybe next year they do go to the draft and they get a quarterback. But I think having this year, you go in with this quarterback who's now got some experience and I think who's earned that chance, deserves that chance to be a starter. So I think for them, you go with the offense to really try to help you find out about Malik Willis and your future. And you can go through building the offensive line or you can go through receiver. So I also think, this could be a team that could really look at a trade because if you're liking, there's some good receiver depth in this draft. And I think, I'm not sure if even all of these first round projected receivers are going to go in the first round. So if they like some of these back end guys, like if they really like an Amari Cooper type of guy, maybe if you're Miami, you do trade back, get some collateral. And you're knowing, hey, I could probably still get one of these first round, evaluated wide receivers later back in the first. I don't necessarily have to jump here. Now, I think if Carnell Tate is potentially here, and in my case, he would be, if Jordan Tyson's here, then maybe you pull the trigger and you go receiver. I'm going to have them go with Spencer Fano, offensive tackle. I think Austin Jackson, and he's been in the league about 6 years now. He's okay, but he hasn't developed in what you wanted out of him. And Patrick Paul on the other side, it's not like he's an all-pro tackle as well. Decent starter. Why not go ahead, upgrade that? I think either of the Utah boys, one of them's probably available. Grab one of them. Of course, there's a couple other tackle options. There's also good depth of tackle. So I think they should go there. But like I said, if Carnell Tate's there at 11 and they want to go Tate, or if Tyson's there and they want to go him, could certainly see it. Or trading back and get that receiver, I think make a lot of sense. So those are kind of where I think Miami's going to go. Matt just showed me something. I'm assuming a name. So go ahead and talk to us a little bit about Miami real quick.
I have them going either wide receiver or tackle. I think if we would have done it before the Waddle trade, maybe not a wide receiver here, but in fact, they legit don't have anybody really in that wide receiver room. I mean, they picked up a Jaden Tolbert from our Cowboys, serviceable number 3, but nothing more than that. You took Tyson earlier. That's who I'd probably pick
Yeah.
for them. Or he also took the offensive tackle. I can't pronounce his last name, but it's the dude that starts with an M. Last
Oh,
name
for
starts with an
Miami?
M. I
Yeah,
mean,
he's not gonna be there
both
at
those
11. I'll just
guys would be
t
good fit, but I feel like the receiver depth is there. I think they go tackle and take a tackle there and Moy guy or Malo guy or Malagu.
From the Hurricane. I just don't think he'll be there. I think it'll probably be one of the Utah kids. Yeah, I mean, I think Manu honestly is probably the safest pick in this draft, and that's why I think he's definitely going to go in the top 10. But if he's there at 11, yeah, I mean, Miami should absolutely scoop him up. Sounds like we're kind of along the same line there with the Dolphins. All right, let's move on to the Dallas Cowboys. This is our team. This gets really interesting. The way that I've mocked it, it's unfortunate. Like the guys I really want are gone. Specifically, I want Caleb Downs. He's my number one player in this draft. I've talked about that. I would love for the Cowboys to be able to upgrade. I think our safeties are okay, but you want to find that Darren Woodson, right? And I think a guy like Caleb Downs could be that next Darren Woodson. I think he'd certainly be an upgrade. I just love everything about him as a player, but he's not available here. David Bailey, another guy, of course. I mean, David Bailey, I think right now he's actually odds on favorite to a number 2 to New York Jets. Actually, if you look at the sports books, a lot of times they know some stuff. And yesterday, at least, when I was looking at it, Bailey was the projected favorite to go to the Jets. Him and RL Reese have gone back and forth, but so I don't think Bailey will be there. Downs might be. I'm gonna really hope he is. I think if a guy like Mansour Delaney is still available, I mean that could be really intriguing. I like McCoy a lot, but the injury thing worries me a little bit. Not all that. Like I've already had him going in my mock too. I think with the Chiefs at 9. Um, so I wouldn't hate it, but I'd rather not deal with the worry there. I like McCoy upside a little more than Delaney. But Delaney doesn't have the injury problem, so make me feel a little bit better. But really, we could go best defensive player available too. Our defense was not good last year. So who is that guy? Because a lot of those top defensive players already gone. I do think my pick, Matt, with the Cowboys is more based upon what I think is going to be left available because the Cowboys are going to pick again at 20. Now, I do think the Cowboys definitely might, because we have 2 picks in the first, could heavily be involved in trade talks. We might see a trade out of the Cowboys where they're only going to end up with one pick, and it's because they trade up probably to get like into the top 10. So that could very well happen. I've got Keldrick Falk, the edge rusher out of Auburn. I do think there's some risk with that guy. I'm seeing his name everywhere on a lot of mocks, a lot of the different big boards and scouting projections. I mean, some certainly think this guy's a top 10. Think he's right up there with the possibility of Bain and David Bailey as far as premier edge rushers. Others have some real concerns about him going up this high in the draft, but I think there's certainly that upside and that potential. We need a lot of help with our pass rush off the edge, so I certainly think he would give that. Does he give it at a value at number 12? The more and more that I think about this pick, the more I'm a little hesitant to actually want to see this come to fruition and us take Keldrick Falk at 12 if he's even there. If guys like Downs and Bailey, of course, and Delaney and are gone, and I know you'd probably love to see like a Sonny Styles here. I'm sure is a guy that you would love to see the Cowboys have an opportunity at. So yeah, unfortunately for me, I think at 12 is going to be a guy that I'm going to bite my tongue on. I'm probably going to like if we stay put at 20, what we do at 20 better, just because there is a lot of depth and there's value at these positions. I just think you're probably reaching. You're probably not going to get a Keldrick Falk at 20. And so the potential with him there, I think maybe you shoot the same with Sonny Styles. I think it's all about potential with those guys, and they're not going to be available at 20 most likely. So if they're there and you want them, you take them at 12, and then at 20, I think we'll still have a good option there to grab. I do believe with the Cowboys. The other thing I think about too, the more and more I think about it, offensive line help is something that could be there. We could upgrade Terrence Steele. Now we might have an opportunity to do that at 20. We'll talk about that later as well. But a guy I don't think is going to be available at 20, that the more and more I think about it, I did mock, the more I'm almost leaning to like, Ione, the guard from Penn State. I mean, he looks to be probably the only interior offensive lineman that's going to go in this draft. And I'm pretty positive, because I think he's not going to be there at 20. Maybe we should go with him probably to upgrade, over TJ Bass. I'll put him on the other side of Tyler Booker because I think he's a sure thing. Like, is he gonna be great? I don't know, but I think is he gonna be a really good guard in this league? Most likely. If I had a choice of Keldrick Falk or even for me, Sonny Styles, or I don't know, in that moment, with it being my team, it makes it a little more tough to make this decision. I'm not sure I want hand in the card with the guard from Penn State, but I'll put Keldrick Falk here still as the edge rusher. So how do you feel about our Cowboys?
They gotta go defense. They have to straight up go defense. Any defensive player, take the best ranked defensive player on their board with this pick. Period. End of story. We were god awful. We were a borderline Super Bowl team if our defense was half better. So I have them. He's gone on your board. I still have him on mine. I don't like him as much, but he's probably not going to be there at 20, and that's Brew McCoy from Tennessee. We gotta shore up that secondary. I mean, we did okay picking up some pieces, but maybe it might ease into McCoy, ease him back in, but I just feel like I'm only making that pick by default. We need to go corner. You hear a lot of good things about him. I like what I've seen. It's my big issue is durability. That's why I had Jordan Tyson fall. The talent's there for both those guys, but the durability factor. We need someone that can kind of step in and play. Because Deron Bland has proven not durable. The kid we drafted last year out of East Carolina fell into the same category as McCoy. Revel had all the talent in the world to be a first round pick, but his ACL pushed him into the third round. So it's a default pick. There's not another corner that I'm comfortable taking that high. Maybe take him at 20, but there's not an edge rusher that high that I'm comfortable taking. 'Cause I'm not a big fan of Falk. I think Falk, for the reasons why you were contemplating that one, he falls. He's not gonna get out of the first round, but he's going to fall.
Yeah, and thanks for talking me off the ledge there. I mean, that is what it comes down to, right? Like, we've gotta get better defensively. It's kinda crazy if at 12 we don't go defense. So I think we do. That's ultimately why I'm gonna stick with an edge rusher. Like I said, a cornerback makes a lot of sense. Can we do we really wanna go forward with Revel as our starting cornerback? And so to have someone go alongside Deron Bland, I think makes a lot of sense. I do think, right, there could be value at 20. I think there are good corners that are probably gonna be available at 20 where you could still make and hey, Jamad McCoy might be a guy who falls. He could be available at 20 because people are so concerned about the torn ACL. Like, it would be crazy if he's one of those guys that falls way farther than people think. I think there's actually potential there with him. Delon's probably the only one I guarantee is from a corner position is gone by 20 for sure. Um, so, yeah, I agree all around. Probably best defensive player available. Even the edge rusher from Miami, Messidor, maybe you like him more than Falk. I mean, I could see that them going with him as well. Yeah, man, it's gonna be interesting to see what they do. Like I said, I think they're gonna get active. I kinda put it at 50-50 if the Cowboys trade that number 20th pick and probably their 12 too and swap it and then give the other one up. I think they might find themselves into the top 10 because of this situation at 12 where you're having this debate of, man, there's so many other guys we wanted. Well, hey, if all of a sudden Caleb Downs or Sonny Styles, those guys are there, or even Delon or whatever, like they're still there in a situation where they can make them move up into the top 10. I think the Cowboys might be doing that. So certainly could happen. And
That Giants trade probably changed Dallas's plans to get up in front of a division rival because they both need similar needs,
yeah, and it's
especially
interesting that happened after our last episode, right? And now that's what Giants now have two picks, the Bengals none. They get Dexter Lawrence essentially for the 10th pick in this draft. Great for them. They've already extended him, and now the Giants are going to go. And yeah, the Giants same thing. I mean, we had talked about it. The opportunity to get Caleb Downs. They also might be in the Jeremiah Love sweepstakes as well. But another corner line, but there's plenty that they could do too, and including even another receiver to go along with Neighbors. So Giants are interesting, having 5 and 10, and yeah, that could force us to maybe try to get in front of the Giants at 10. That definitely could be viable, and we might trade with Arizona at 3. I've seen mocks that actually show that. I mean, we've got the
they're
capital, some of the things we could go all the way. This could start at 3. We could trade with Arizona. There's a lot of reasons on both sides why that could happen.
Dallas wants Sonny Styles.
Yeah.
That's who they want. And then
He's a
I
Jerry
think
Jones type guy, I think. I could see Jerry Jones loving the flash of what he did at the combine. Won't surprise me at all. Like I said, I'm
that'd be
I'm a little
stupid.
hesitant on it, but I could definitely see the Cowboys even trading up to get Sonny.
I'm all for a trade, but we can't give up 20 and not have and picks in the top half of the
Yeah.
second round. We
Yeah.
can't we
I
gotta
like the
either
2
keep
first round
both of
picks.
them or so I
I
like
like the
this
2
one
first round
trade that
picks a
I've
lot.
seen, so This one trade that I've seen is Dallas trading up to 9 with Kansas City, and they get Kansas City's 29. I'd be okay with a move like that one.
Okay.
We're
Yeah.
not giving up too much.
Yeah.
So,
I agree. She's 29. There's still going to be like another corner probably there, or even an offensive tackle. There's going to be offensive tackles left, and and even edge
yeah.
rusher, like a Cassius Howell out of A&M, type of guy who may not end up going in the first round, who could be worth it at 29 if you want to run that route. Makes some sense. Let's move on to 30 with the Los Angeles Rams. They're a stacked team. There's no other way around it. The Rams are going to be favorites in the NFC next year. They probably will be as long as Stafford continues to play. How many years does he have left? We never know. His last year could be any year.
What team you doing? We're gonna run the Lions, aren't we?
The Rams are picking at 13.
But the Lions are picking at 13.
The Lions are at 17.
Oh, I flipped them. Go
Yeah,
ahead. Sorry. I flipped them.
no, Rams have the 13th pick. They did go ahead and get McDuffie from Kansas City. They got the other kid too. I still think you could upgrade and go with a cornerback here. Um, like if a McCoy's there, I don't think it's a bad decision on the Ram side. I do think there's possibility to upgrade there at the right tackle position. Upgrade for McClendon Jr., especially with Stafford. He's not getting any more nimble. But ultimately, as I said, they're a really good team. They've certainly hit on Jared Verse recently, a heck of a pass rusher, one of these great hybrid players. But I think you can always add to that pass rush. That's one of the luxuries that you have when you're already a great football team. So that's what I have them doing here. I have them going with Akeem Mesidor, that edge rusher I talked about out of Miami. To me, at just that point, he's that best edge rusher left available. I have seen some talks about Ruben Bain falling this far just because of the short arms. There is some hesitancy with that, and that being a problem in the NFL. I mean, I would love that. I mean, if the Rams could find themselves in position to end up with Bain, look out. Here, I think for them, maybe um, best best edge rusher available. And at this point, I have that as Messidor. So, Matt, I'll let you kind of go on the fly here, rethink this a little bit on the Los Angeles Rams. No, they're at 13. So tell me a little bit about your thoughts on the Rams.
First of all, chat, I apologize for that one. So I had Rams going wide receiver. Uh, Mekhi Lemon, I think, would be a solid piece to that. Devontae Adams isn't getting any younger. Puka Nacua seems to find himself in trouble. Got himself a little big head, so who knows if he may or may not be suspended. And I think gadget type wide or head coach like Sean McVay could utilize a guy like Mekhi Lemon and maybe push them over the top to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and a lot of mocks do have them going with a guy like who I love. I love Mekhi Lemon. He actually falls pretty far from me. Spoiler alert. Just because of fit, he's actually probably my number two receiver in this class. I mean, he's just he's south of 6 feet. And so you've got to kind of find the right fit there. And the Rams would be that. The Rams absolutely have the luxury of taking a sub 6 foot receiver into Mekhi Lemon. For, especially they're looking at long-term replacements as well for Devontae Adams. You're thinking Devontae might only be there maybe another year, but I just don't think that's a need now. And this Rams offense is already so good. They're going to be one of the best in the NFL next year, if not the best NFL. So that's where if I'm the Rams, I would more kind of towards the Cowboys situation. The Rams are still good on defense. I think there's room for improvement. There's room to still improve that pass rush specifically. Whereas on offense, yes, you could always upgrade a little bit. You could look to the future, but I just automatically think, they're already going to be so well situated offensively. That's where I think, maybe next year you look into that, or in later rounds, you start thinking about there might be a good second or third round still wide receiver that you can take and add into this rather than going with that first round selection. But a lot of people are along the same line of thinking there with you on the Rams and receiver. So at number 14, the Baltimore Ravens, who definitely probably a little disappointed to be picking at 14, first year in a long, long time without John Harbaugh there for them. And I think this is a great spot for them to get to pick this high, in the draft. They're a team that's got, not as many needs, not as many options as everybody else. But what I specifically look at Baltimore, it really is, I think you got to go in two ways, two directions. And I think that's pretty similar to the Dolphins that we just talked about. Along that line of thinking, you can go on that offensive line, which I think is the weakest part of this Ravens football team. And when you've got a quarterback that your offense is really obviously driven around in Lamar Jackson and he hasn't had this great career of staying healthy, you could look to address that. I mean, outside of Ronnie Staley, there's not really a legit starter on that old line you feel great about. Or you could go wide receiver because that's another thing that Lamar Jackson doesn't have. He doesn't have that number one. Zay Flowers is good, but he's not your typical X receiver either. So I think you look kind of same as we talked about the Dolphins. You either go to that offensive line or you look to the wide receiver group. I think when we talk about that offensive line, right, that does include going into a guard. You can the Penn State kid Ione. I think they definitely could utilize him. And then it depends on what tackles are available to kind of go alongside an opposite Staley. For me, though, on my board, I don't actually think he's going to be here. But from just a what should I, this is as far as I would let Carnell Tate drop. I've still got Carnell Tate available. If I'm the Ravens, I'm picking him. I mean, I definitely think, I mean, he's a big dude. And with a smaller guy like Zay Flowers there, I think it's a great fit. So I think at very least, he's going to bring a different dynamic to your receiving room that Baltimore doesn't have. And that would very much benefit Lamar Jackson, even if Carnell Tate maybe isn't quite the talent upside that some others are projecting him to be. I still think because of the fit there in Baltimore, he's going to make an impact. And yeah, it's very possible Carnell Daycom is the best receiver of this class, and he ends up being one of these top receivers, in the NFL. If I'm Baltimore, even though I'm not that high on Carnell Tate personally, at the Ravens at 14, if he's there, I'm running to the podium to hand in that card. I would love that pick for them specifically. And I think Carnell Tate's probably already gone for you, man. I think you're a little bit higher on him. So tell me about, a little bit about where you would go in that instance, specifically like if a guy like Tate isn't there.
I don't see them going receiver. You're right. I think they do need wide receiver help. I think they can snag it in day two. They could probably walk away with the second or third round pick and maybe sneak one in the fourth or in the fifth. I have them going with the Penn State offensive lineman. His name is so hard to pronounce,
Yeah.
but Ione, I guess. Ola Io. We're just gonna butcher it and
Yeah.
call it good. I think he is a Baltimore Raven. He's 6'4", 320. He's a big dude.
Yeah, he's a Raven for sure. I mean, it would just make all the sense in the world. And I think again, he's a safe pick, gritty guy. Yeah, he would fit that Baltimore culture
And I think if
perfectly.
at 14 to see the first interior lineman go off the board isn't too bad because what Dallas went Booker at 12 last year or 13. But I think this would probably be a good range for the number one interior lineman to fly off the board to Baltimore.
Agree there. I think we're both kind of in lockstep a little bit there. Just kind of depends on how the draft falls for them. At 15, Matt, you got this one right. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So the Buccaneers could go a few different routes. I am seeing um, quite a few mocks. This is where we're going to start, I think, really talking about Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon. I think this is probably as early as he goes. I could be wrong. And he might go to Tampa. They could use an upgrade, use a better weapon for Baker, right? Mike Evans is now in San Francisco. So it's not that they're bare by any means. I still kind of like the wide receiver room in Tampa, but you might feel like you've lost a little bit of something, and going to get a tight end and Kenyon Sadiq makes some sense. Do I think it's really addressing the biggest needs for Tampa? No. So I'm not going that route. Again, we're going to keep talking about them. We'll keep calling the Penn State guard because you just say that. The tackles are great in Tampa, but the guards are not. So they're a team that could definitely say, hey, let us shore up that offensive line in front of Baker and go get that kid. I think they also could go edge rusher. I don't think they stand out specifically, at rushing the passer. But for me, I think a real area of weakness right now for them is an upgrade back in the secondary. So I've actually got Colton Hood, cornerback out of Tennessee. So I think for Tampa, and regardless if it's Hood or who, like Hood, he played opposite McCoy for a bit. Of course, McCoy was out last year. He stepped in and did a really good job. Doesn't seem to have as high of a ceiling, that profile, but he doesn't have the injury concerns either. And I think the way that he was able to step up and still really solidify a really good secondary for Tennessee, a good pass defense, kind of spoke volumes. There are a number of cornerbacks, I think, in this standpoint. McCoy might even be there, right? That essentially they could look at. But I like Tampa Bay addressing that cornerback. But honestly, like I said, if they drafted the Penn State guard, if they just went and got an edge rusher, again, give me time who's available. A few different ways that they could go, but I'm gonna go with Colton Hood out of Tennessee.
Thought we were gonna have one right there for a second where we matched one up. 'Cause I actually did give him Kenyon Sadiq. Yeah,
Okay.
upgrade over Cade Otton, a nice weapon. I mean, got good size. He's I don't think he's like a Mike Evans-esque, but he brings that size that that receiving room doesn't have. Cade Otton's good, but I think he's more of a legit number 2, borderline fringe 1, but Kenyon Sadiq will check that number 1 tight end box on the board. Yes, I think they need to go on the defensive side of the ball. Colton Hood would be a solid pick for them. I didn't expect them to take Emeka Egbuka last year either, so Tampa Bay might throw us another curveball and take probably honestly could be one of the top 3 or 4 players left on my board at 15 for a team that could probably use a little bit of upgrade everywhere.
Yeah. I agree. If this was an actual mock, I think I'm mocking Kenyon Sadiq to Tampa Bay because of what you said. That size that he brings, they could use an upgraded tight end. Love to give, Baker another weapon with Evans being out there. I think it makes sense. It's probably what I expect, but he could be gone by then. But I think he'll be there. That would probably be the pick. But if it's not, ultimately, I do think addressing that secondary, working with the Penn State can also make just a lot of sense there for Tampa. Let's go again here to the New York Jets. So they've got that second pick. They've also got their second pick in this first round, and they've got 3 next year. We've talked about that. They could be involved in trades, Willie Dean, all of that stuff. I had them going Arvell Reese at number 2. I was just talking about a little bit earlier. We're starting to see a lot of headway towards them taking David Bailey even at 2 as well. Either way, I think that defensive front seven's where they're going to go with that second pick. I guess Caleb Downs has been mocked there too, and he's my best player. I think it could make some sense, but do we actually foresee that happening too? I'm not sure. At 16, they're the New York Jets, right? So they could go any way. Like they need help anywhere. This is where I have that guy's name we can't pronounce out of Penn State going. I think they need a sure thing, and this is about building a foundation for the Jets. We talked about it earlier. Really, for the Jets, they really don't want to be good this year. In reality, right? 3 first-round picks. You want those picks to be as high as possible. So, of course, this would impact at least one of them next year because you want to be able to get your franchise quarterback and then some other really good pieces. So you go into next season ready to start being competitive. And so it's about the future. This next season is kind of just a more of a development, continue to build. So I like foundational pieces. I think Arvell Reese and the guard from Penn State. Those are foundational pieces. Absolutely. I do believe the other name that I kind of did write down here, Matt, that I could see them going could be like a Denzel Boston, wide receiver. Now, if like a Jordan Tyson somehow fall into this standpoint, love that. I'm not sure that's going to happen. A Carnell Tate, of course, as well. I don't think he'll be here this late, but if he was, of course, those can make a lot of sense. Now, I think Garrett Wilson's a fine receiver. He's a number 1. He's not an elite receiver in the league, but he's a number 1. They've got Brees Hall, which is a nice weapon. The offensive line all around is also relatively solid for the New York Jets. Specific at the tackles, but I just think again you're securing that foundation so much with bringing in the guard from Penn State there. But Denzel Boston, because he's a 6'4" receiver, right? So he's another one of these big dudes. And with Garrett Wilson only being at 6 foot, he's not one of the largest frame guys. I just think again that really helps specifically their red zone threat. That adds a little bit more dynamicity to their offense and their passing attack there in New York, where it can make some sense. Ultimately, like I said, I would take the safer pick with going into the interior of the offensive line here. But the other way I would like them to go, specifically because I believe they're for sure going to go defense with their first pick in the first round, is you could then go back, and take a receiver going from there.
I'm giving them a wide receiver. I have a Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M. I think he'd be a nice number 2 alongside Garrett Wilson. Not nearly as tall. He's got the range, I think, to develop himself into a nice solid number 2 alongside Garrett Wilson for some years to come. I've seen him all over the place, like him more than others that will probably go higher. But I think just he's a simple, safe, good player put alongside Wilson.
Now, and you have Makai Lemon gone, right? So we're clear. You
Yeah,
would probably take Makai Lemon there if he was if
I
he
would have
was
taken Lemon here if he was there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how I am on Concepcion, right? And I kind of think like, hey, you have now they don't have like a good number 2. So I totally get it. And again, you're probably along the lines of mocking what's more the possibility of happening. You're probably more right than I am with them saying, hey, we need to get another number 2 receiver alongside Garrett Wilson. So Makai Lemon, because I like him so much, I think it could make some sense to go Mekhi Lemon there, but ultimately, like I said, I'm more thinking about this just from a like, building that structure, building that foundation is the mindset that I would have as a GM for the New York Jets, but it wouldn't surprise me one bit if they go receiver here at 16, if they're still there at 16. All right,
They'll
number
probably
7.
take the best player available at that rate at 16, I think, because they
Yeah,
need
and they can.
everything.
Yeah, and they can too because they need everything. If a player any of these players actually ends up falling, that most are projecting to the top 10 and he's there at 16, yeah, the Giants probably just scoop him up. Absolutely. Let's move to 17. Now it's the Detroit Lions. This is when the Detroit Lions are on the clock, Matt. So I think the Detroit Lions could do one of two things. I actually think they needed to do one, but I think they could go two ways because they could definitely use another edge rusher to go along the opposite side of Aiden Hutchinson. And there's going to probably be some attractive edge rushers available. There will be for sure, even some guys like I've already mocked, just a few picks ahead, like a Mesidor very well could potentially be there. Kedrick Falk could possibly be there. And you're going to have a whole bunch of other defensive ends towards the back end like a Zion Young and a Cassius Howell and stuff like that. Probably a little high for those guys. I think they've got to go offensive line. That offensive line has completely changed. Out of Sewell, who is the best tackle in football, and he might just be honestly the best overall player in the NFL. If I was to put a grade next to every player's name based upon their position, I'm not sure I grade anybody higher than him. But outside of that, on every other part of the offensive line, they could use an upgrade in Detroit now with the removal of Decker and everybody else through retirement or free agency. They need help, and that's why I think they have to go there. And I would probably go the other tackle. Now, again, if the Penn State kid's there, no problem with them going with him because he's definitely one of
Mhm.
the highest rated offensive linemen in the draft. I'm going Cannon Proctor. I think Cannon Proctor, offensive tackle out of Bama, is getting a little overlooked. So you bookend those tackles. This is a big dude. This is a ferocious dude. Alabama they get these tackles pro ready through playing Alabama football. So I always feel like you're pretty safe and secure. I know there are some other kids, Monroe Freeling's name keeps going up and up and up, within a lot of these draft boards and within these mock drafts. Could one of the Utah kids still be available? It's possible, but I like Caden Proctor a lot more than some others. But if you're the Lions, I think make the smart move. There's definitely enough depth at offensive linemen between the tackles and the Penn State kid that there's going to be a good player there for you to draft. Just draft him. Are you on the same line of thinking I am, Matt?
Yeah, I have Fano still on the board, so I'm gonna have they gotta replace Taylor Decker, a mainstay on that offensive line for a long time. Jared Goff gets hit,
Yep.
and I mean, yeah, Sewell's good, but that offensive line needs to be upgraded a little bit. Decker was kind of just showing his age, long in the tooth there, and wanted more than what he probably deserved at this point in his career. Great offensive tackle. I will definitely say that had himself a pretty great career in Detroit, but he was starting to show his age and durability down the stretch there. And that division is not easy. You got Micah Parsons twice a year now, so I think you got to protect Jared Goff, protect the future. They could realistically go with one of the best defensive players available too. Like the edge would be solid for them. But I think you need to shore up that offensive line and get those holes created for Gibbs and Pacheco going forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and you made a good point there too that when I was putting this together was definitely thought of too. I mean, the Lions go as golf goes, right? That offense goes as golf goes. And you've seen him when he struggles. That's when the Lions were dropping ball games. The Lions were looking bad and the fan base was getting um, really upset and frustrated. And that's because you get that out of golf. And that's why I think this is where you got to go offensive line because this is gonna be the worst offensive line Jared Goff's had in front of him in Detroit, since getting there. If they keep it as it is, they need to hit, on an offensive lineman that can come in right away and be an upgrade. Because I think the offensive line play is still going to be skeptical because you only can draft one guy here at 17, right? You can't overhaul the whole thing. So I think offensive line is still going to be an issue for them. But I do think, like I said, if you can get bookend tackles with the talent that they have on that offense, they could still make things work. So I just think they've got to go that direction. At 18, division rival for the Lions, Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings have a big question out there right now, which is kind of crazy. And Harrison Smith, is simply is he going to come back to them? Like they're waiting on him to tell them, like, is he going to continue to play in football? Is he requesting a trade? Is he what is he doing? They just don't know right now. Like he's basically giving them the heads up on that he might not be there. And so I have seen a lot of mocks where they're saying, hey, you got to take a safety because you could use another safety if he does come back to play alongside of him. Great. I mean, if he's gone, then you really need somebody. But here's the nice thing about Minnesota. I mean, as I was prepping for this and going through Minnesota's roster, really noticing like how good Minnesota's roster is right now from top to bottom. Like they're a very complete football team. They've got a lot of good options there. I mean, their offensive line is just, I think, one of the better ones poised going into next season. And as we've kind of gone through this exercise so far, so many of these early teams, right? We continuously keep talking about all these. It's because there's a lot of good offensive linemen available in the draft, but it's also because there's a need. With Minnesota, the one of the first teams come across, and you're like, nah, their offensive line's fine. You don't need to go there. You can look at other options. So I think you can look at best player available. I think they're a team that's that good that has that luxury available to them. Now, the biggest obviously concern why Minnesota just isn't, a team that we jump off the page, even though the top to bottom, we love their roster, is because of the quarterback play, right? Like, I think it's safe to say they kind of missed on McCarthy and they went out and outside Kyler Murray. But Kyler Murray, his consistencies, we know his height, and he just can't stay healthy is the main thing. But he can be electric. He can be good if he can just stay on the field. And he's going to have some of the best weapons in the NFL in Minnesota. That's why I say, you know what? Again, I don't think this player is going to be here, but I don't know what I should do. This is one of the, I think, the most overvalued guys in the draft that I still have got there. This for me, as I talk about, this player, and as I say, hey, don't I'm not in love with him. I think, the projections on him are a little overstated, but if he's there at 18 and I'm Minnesota, I'm taking Jeremiah Love. This is where I would be willing to take Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame because Aaron Jones is just getting older and Jordan Mason's okay, but I mean, he's not a long-term solution there. So this is where, hey, I mean, in my mind, I got Jeremiah Love here. Let's get out. I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I would go there. Now he could, I guess it's possible. Enough people think like I do. Like I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Some say that some of these teams could look at Jeremiah Love in the running back position and bypass him because I do think specifically, Samantha, when you look at it, if he gets out of the top 10, I do think Jeremiah Love could fall a little bit. I do think it's possible some of these other teams aren't necessarily going to have that need at running back. Where you look at the Rams, Baltimore, the Cowboys, the Bucks. The Bucks could with Bucky Irvin, but I still think they kind of have a two-headed monster that they kind of like, and the Lions aren't going to shake him. So it's like if he gets out of the top 10, I think there's a slight chance that he's available at 18 for the Vikings. So I don't think it's again out of the realm of possibility. And then you would trade a guy like Jordan Mason, probably for, a late round pick in next year's draft to somebody probably early in the season when one of their running backs goes down. Now they need someone. Then you could trade a Mason. Or you could even trade Aaron Jones, right? So I don't
Yeah.
think it's too big of a running back room. You need your future star running back. And then how dynamic would that offense improve? They're already a very dynamic, very good offense there in Minnesota. Get him a guy like that. But I'll let you take the floor here from Matt because I know that you're not going to have Jeremiah Love available.
Nope.
I didn't talk a lot about what the other potential needs are outside of safety, which again, I would say don't go there. Go ahead, hope that Harrison Smith comes back. My gut feeling is he will. But tell us about what else they need.
Well, I have them taking Thieneman out of Oregon. I think I don't know what Harrison Smith is doing, but they're gonna need to replace Harrison Smith. That's a tough guy to replace in its own right. One of the best just people to have in your locker room in the whole entire league. He's a leader. He goes out there, shows up every day. He lays his heart out there every single play. I can see Thieneman kind of being filling that role as the overall number one guy either next this up not this upcoming season, but next season or the year after, depending on how much more we get out of Harrison Smith. I think Harrison Smith probably does come back because there's some stats that he would like to go for, and that doesn't have very many people in the NFL history having. So he might be playing for a shot of that opportunity to solidify his Hall of Fame career. I think he's a Hall of Famer in my opinion. I think they get Harrison Smith's replacement here at 18.
Okay.
But they could go offensive line. They don't have a center, but I don't think there's a center I would take at 18. They might have to trade back
Yeah.
because Ryan Kelly retired and they got a big hole there.
Yeah, they
So
can improve
Minnesota
at
could be a
center, but
viable.
there's no centers even being talked about with the first round grade, and that's usually pretty high for a center anyways. But especially the rest of their offensive line is pretty darn solid with the guards and the tackles. Let's move on to our next one, the Carolina Panthers, a playoff team who took a little bit of a leap last year. You started to see some development in Bryce Young, their quarterback, and then just in the team in general. I think the management has done a really good job kind of putting the pieces together on that team. Here's been another opportunity at pick 19. So I think, a few ways that they could go. And there's still obviously room and there's holes and, within this football team. I think this is where we start really talking. You just talked about a safety at Minnesota, absolutely, and Dylan in Oregon. I like him a lot. I also like another safety even more, and that's McNeil Warren out of Toledo. But I really do like both of those guys, and I in Carolina could use an upgrade at safety for sure. So you could see them go with either one of those. The Panthers, while they've got, some decent, you know, guys that can get after it. In the pass rush, like, they've got Devin Lloyd, a Derek Brown. They've just traded for Jalen Phillips as well, which I think is a nice move. So they could go edge, but I think because they kind of addressed that with getting Jalen Phillips in the offseason, I'm going to go ahead here and a guy I think you mocked a couple picks ago, and Kenyon Sadiq, tight end Oregon. They hit on McMillan, really nice number one that they were able to find in last year's draft. The other receivers, around McMillan are okay in like Coker and Leggett, Mechie the third. So I could see them still wanting to possibly get, a number two if Sadiq was gone. But in my mind, why not get Sadiq? I mean, I think that's a big upgrade over what they currently have at tight end. He's essentially kind of a receiver, but the guy can still block. So yeah, it's adding that other weapon. Now you have McMillan and Sadiq both as weapons for your young quarterback and Bryce Young. I just love that pick if he's there. Again, I would hate it if they went safety because I like both those safeties a lot, especially if Sadiq's gone. But if Sadiq's there, I'm probably going Sadiq there at 19.
I have them going safety, getting Emmanuel McNeil out of Toledo,
Oh,
sure up that secondary a little bit.
okay. Keep it short and swivel there. At number 20, we're back to our Dallas Cowboys. So, of course, we've talked about them at length a little bit earlier and all their needs, and they go back. So, earlier, I went with, Keldrick Falk, but I also said, man, I don't know, maybe go with the guard from Penn State, but ultimately, we know we got to address that defense. And that's my mindset the whole time. If we stay at 12 and 20, let's load up on two defensive players. Let's really try to turn that defense around. I still believe in that offense enough, even though, like I said, yeah, there's holes. There's some areas for improvement, specifically, like I said, at tackle or guard for the Cowboys on the O line. But I still think even with what we've got, we're going to be a really good offense if all of our main pieces stay healthy. And that's where still, yes, like I said, you kind of talked about the ledge, go defense. And so here, the guy's name you just mentioned, Emmanuel McNeil Warren. I love him as a safety out of Toledo. Wouldn't hate the kid out of Oregon either, but I like Emmanuel a little bit more. Again, this is a situation here where there's still going to be tackles. There's still going to be cornerbacks available. And I think, like I said, I think I'm going to like what we do with pick 20 if we still have this pick because there's so many good names around that value. I think 12 is just like a weird spot where you kind of get out of like those top guys, particularly defensive guys that I think are really of value are probably gone by 12. And you're kind of gonna be left picking to someone that you don't necessarily love, but it's gonna have that potential. So the likely would take. But at 20, I think there's gonna be a ton of guys. There's a bunch of cornerbacks. And there's gonna be one of these two safeties. I think at least is gonna be there. There's gonna be an offensive tackle worth taking here too. We could go for an upgrade over Terrence Steele. But ultimately, I'm a guy who's at one of the top of my big board is McNeil Warren. So I'll go him at 20.
I have us going defensive end, getting Messidor. Tish high. I'm not. I think after I was a little bit higher on the defensive ends, on the top three or four. After that, it's kind of like best fit for your team type. Doesn't I don't think one stands out to me over the Messidor might bring that pedigree that we had back in the 90s when we had a Russell Maryland, Charles Haley harassing quarterbacks during our Super Bowl runs. So I think we go there, pair him up alongside Ezaraku. Ezaraku grew up quite a bit last year. I think he definitely proved his value there in the second round. And we brought back Sam Williams. I think we put Messidor alongside with those three guys, have rotational players. I think we'd be pretty solid on the defensive end, adding a guy like Messidor.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely too. I mean, I think about it at 20, there is a good shot, right? Like Falk or Messidor's there. Like, one of those guys is still available and you could get him at 20. And so hopefully, maybe, McCoy is still there at 12 or Sonny Styles is possibly there at 12, probably not. And, we could go that direction at
Mm.
12 and then grab a Messidor at 20. I would probably leave the draft feeling pretty happy if something like that played out. So yeah, it's gonna be really interesting, especially with the Cowboys, to see how we go. But we've got some needs, and I think we're going to tackle them, and we'll be looking forward to moving into next year. Specifically, if we bring in two first rounders, or if we do something crazy and get up to like number three, and maybe we lose that 20th pick, but we're grabbing a guy like Downs or Styles or something along that nature, right? So let's move on to 21. The Pittsburgh Steelers. So for the Steelers, if Kenyon Sadiq is there, I love that. Like they went out. I've been seeing other mocks out there and analysts talk about them getting another receiver. Like they brought in Pittman to now go along with Metcalf. And I get you want to get Rodgers his weapons, but if you could do that at tight end where they could use a little bit of an upgrade, That's what I would love for Pittsburgh. I think they're gonna be really good. I think that combination of Pittman and Metcalf should work really well, in Pittsburgh. So I don't think receivers, and then the defense is really good, right? Kind of the opposite of the Cowboys. Like the Steelers, there's certain positions where they could upgrade, but for the most part, man, Pittsburgh's really good defensively. So I'm thinking you've got to go offense here. Their offensive line is terrible. It's a bad offensive line for Aaron Rodgers, so of course you could look at going there. At this point, a lot of those guys have been taken. Now there are still some there that they certainly could take, and I don't think would be a bad move. But I would ultimately lead towards getting Sadiq if he's there at tight end. I don't have him there, so I am going to have them go offensive line. Blake Miller, offensive tackle out of Clemson. I mean, he's a guy that's got great reach. He's been in great length. So his pass protection is really one of the highest rated from these tackles, where he himself, he's ranked a little bit lower down compared to some of the other tackles, but his actually ability to push the defenders out and create that pass protection is one of the top rated in this draft. And I think that's huge for 40-some-year-old Aaron Rodgers when you have him at quarterback. And I think he just kind of seems like a Pittsburgh Steelers, as we talked about with Baltimore earlier too, type of guy, type of offensive lineman. So I'm going with Blake Miller here for Pittsburgh.
And them going defensive tackle again to pair up with Derek Harmon. Their defensive front line's a little older. Watt and Hayward can't play forever, so let's get another Buckeye in there and get
Ohio
Caden
State.
McDaniel the first get Caden McDaniel, the defensive tackle,
Yeah,
to
and he
replace
seems
the
like a
Buck.
that seems like a Pittsburgh move. I could totally see. I like him as a pro prospect. I actually don't even have him in my first rise. Didn't necessarily find the fit, but if there was going to be a fit, I mean, I do think the Steelers could be it. Again, I just think the Steelers are already so good on defense. It makes more sense to go towards the offensive side of the ball. But I definitely see what you're saying. Now we're going to go to the LA Chargers, and I talked about Kenyon Sadiq being, I think, a good fit to go to Pittsburgh. Guess what? He's even a better fit for the LA Chargers.
Oh, without a doubt.
If Kenyon Sadiq is still available at 22, uh, Harbaugh and that team, they are running to hand in that card to draft Kenyon Sadiq. Makes all the sense in the world. Lad McConkey, was a good pick. He's looking like a really good receiver. And Johnson's kind of been a bust for where he was drafted, but he's been getting better. He's been developing. I think they have a pretty good combination there. So, I would jump at getting another wide receiver. But I do think, man, if you have the opportunity to upgrade at the tight end position, they might even have a chance to maybe do that with the Vanderbilt kid, Eli Stowers, in the second round. But I would love that with Sadiq there for the Chargers. There are a lot of talks about, hey, let's draft another offensive tackle because this O line can't stay healthy. Hey, we saw what happened in the playoffs. Herbert and that team had no chance because the whole starting offensive line was basically out. But when that O line's healthy, like, it should be a good offensive line. All those offensive linemen are pretty good. They just need to stay healthy. So I think you've got to just hope, I think, at least this for one more season, that this O line can stay healthy, stay together. A couple other options too that I thought for the Chargers. They could use an upgrade at corner, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if they got one of these cornerbacks. They have Derwin James, who's definitely one of, like, the top 3 safeties in the NFL. But you know what? A guy like Dylan Thielen from Oregon, I think is would make a lot of sense in this defense. Would be very attractive to go on the other side of Derwin James. Can you just imagine those 2 guys back there, how dynamic that secondary becomes? Now, I think corner is a little bit bigger of a need, but at that point, maybe the corners that are left, maybe even like a guy like Colton Hood, like I talked about, is already drafted, and so you don't have anyone of value for them, and so maybe you do take a guy who's probably higher up in your draft board like a Dylan. But ultimately, I'm gonna go with the Jim Harbaugh type guy to try to create that identity I think that he's looking for, and that's Peter Woods, defensive tackle out of Clemson. And the nice thing about Peter Woods as well, he also bounces out and plays edge. Like, Peter Woods is this girthy guy that you put in the middle of that D line that does have a lot of experience at Clemson. Dabo would push him out on the edge a lot and allow him to work as a pass rusher. He's got that type of game. He was projected coming into this season as like a top 10 type of guy. So he had a high draft stock, and just pretty much everyone on Clemson, right, underdelivered. Like, things just went really south for them as a team, but there's still a lot of optimism. There's still a huge upside with this guy. And I think Jim Harbaugh would love, I could see Peter Woods actually getting drafted considerably higher in this draft than what he's being projected. I think he's a great fit for the Chargers at 22, specifically, like, if Sadiq's not there.
I went I had 2 different players here. But I think they need to protect Herbert. They need depth. The lack of depth
Yeah,
probably
agreed.
hurt LA's chances of making a run in the AFC. So I
Dude, like I
got
said,
them. I can't the Chase Bisonsis or some I can't pronounce his name, but a guard out of Texas A.
mm,
Probably something you could probably get later, but he probably wouldn't be there. And I don't see them trading up necessarily. Colton Hood would be a good pick also for that secondary. But I think they need to make sure Justin Herbert is staying upright and not playing a game with a busted up arm in the playoff like he did last year. Just to shore it up. I think their depth was the biggest issue for them on the offensive line. I think they need to beef it up and
yeah, and that's gotta be on their mind, right? Like, they saw what happened in the playoffs, like, they saw they had a really good team, Herbert was playing well, McConkey had come in, Quentin Johnston's getting better, and then it's just disappointment because your offensive line couldn't stay healthy, and that had to really hurt, so I can look at it from the outside, but I understand them being in the building, living that, feeling that, that might have lingered over, and it might just be too impulsive to go get an offensive line, and you're right, and it makes sense because you need that depth too, and again, mocking, I'd probably saying they're gonna pick an offensive tackle here. I think that if it was me, I would probably go increase that pass rush because really you just have Khalil Mack, is really as far as an efficient rusher goes on that team. Defense altogether is pretty good. That secondary's definitely got some pieces. They need to get Khalil Mack some help, and actually, and just as far as who was left available, I think Peter Woods is a guy that's going to help him do that more than anybody else, even than a traditional edge rusher. So that's why I went there. Let's go to those Philadelphia Eagles, and what they might do. You know, a lot of talk, and I think it could make some sense. You know, go in and offensive tackle again. Come back to them. There's so many of them. We keep talking about them being projected. Lane Johnson, I think he's basically announced to be his last season. So his replacement, and it's not like you couldn't upgrade and get some offensive tackle depth right now. That's just more of a philosophy for me, as you could probably tell from these conversations, is don't address the problems until they're actually a problem. I think especially in the first round, there's too much value, too many other good players that you want to be able to draft to come in and help you next year. Now, the Eagles are certainly one of the teams that they have that, you know, that ability, that assurance that they're already one of the best teams in the NFC, right? They're going to be one of the Super Bowl favorites going into next year. So it's not like they're as dependent on their first round pick as other teams are going to be, where they could say, hey, we're going to draft a guy, honestly, just sit, provide, you know, depth if like Lane Johnson or someone else goes down along that offensive line. But we might be fine if he doesn't play much the first year. And we're grooming him just to be that replacement because we like a tackle. There's a lot of them here that have a lot of upside. Like a Monroe Freeling might be here, right? Well, Blake Miller might be here and they may go in that direction. I could understand it. If it was me, like I said, I'm more of a, hey, address the need when it actually becomes a need. So I've got Denzel Boston, wide receiver, as we talked about earlier, out of Washington, 6'4" guy. And I think he would just be a great fit in Philadelphia to, you know, go along Devontae Smith. Not the biggest guy, small frame. And you get to go opposite him because we know AJ Brown is leaving. So talk about replacing him, replacing his production, although it wasn't all that much last year. And that certainly helped hurt Philadelphia. We saw that. So if they have an opportunity here to go get Denzel Boston, I think he's a guy that definitely helps them and impacts their passing game in a big positive way next year. So that's where I would lean.
mm, and then play the Howie Roseman card with this pick because this is going to be a very Howie
Right.
Roseman pick. They always seem to find guys that are slip sliding, even if they need that position or not. Look what they did with Nakobe Dean, and they got Jahad Campbell, guys that probably should have went higher. They were just falling. And I think Keldrick Falk is a perfect Howie Roseman pick for them. Defensive end, I don't know if they necessarily need it, but I think at this point of the draft for Philadelphia, Denzel Boston would be good. Let's just see exactly what's going to happen with the AJ Brown situation till it actually happens. He's still in the locker room for the Philadelphia Eagles, and they did sure up in free agency. I mean, Boston would be a Howie Roseman pick too, but I feel like Philadelphia has been known to get those defensive players later in the first round that probably should have been a little bit higher in the higher teens and stuff like that. So I think Keldrick Falk would be a solid Philadelphia Eagle pick right there.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. Eagles always seem to prioritize that front defensive seven, right? And they won a Super Bowl 2 years ago because of that front defensive seven. essentially. Yes, I mean, you had some good play on the offensive side. Don't get me wrong, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, things of that nature. But the difference in that football game was that defensive front just destroying Kansas City's offensive line and Patrick Mahomes having no shot. So I could see him going that way. Like I said, I think it's already a strength of theirs, but is what it is. 24 Cleveland Browns, pretty straightforward. When I talked about their pick in the top 10, I think it was at number 6. I had them go with Francis Magoa, offensive tackle from Miami. He's one of the, I think, the safest picks in this draft, maybe the safest, and that's what Cleveland needs. And I said at that time, I'm going to go there at that point because they need wide receiver help, but receivers are going to be available at the depth. So later on in their second pick of the first round, 24, go receiver, and that's where I would go here for them. If they could grab, so if they can grab an offensive tackle and then they can grab a receiver. I think Cleveland Browns are well on the way. Well, again, they're a team that's still probably preparing to be competitive, probably still a couple years down the road. Now, defensively, they're already really good. And that's where, hey, dress the offensive side of the ball. But if Shador Sanders, he's going to have to develop and get better. I guess if he took a huge step, I guess Cleveland could be competitive next year. It's not like they're in the same place as the Jets are, where like there's almost no chance the Jets are going to be good this year. If Shador Sanders took a solid leap, Cleveland's defense is good enough, and if they hit on 2, like, picks on the opposite side of the ball, Cleveland could become a factor in the AFC North. And so for them, I'm going Mekhi Lemon. He's one of my favorite receivers. Just I haven't found necessarily the perfect fit for him, being with his size. But I think they need another guy opposite Jerry Jeudy. They need, I think, a guy that could make Jerry Jeudy a number 2. I don't know if Mekhi Levin's that, but just based upon where there is, I think Mekhi Levin gives them another dynamic. And Shedeur Sanders, that's what he's all about. He's all about being a dynamic, moving quick. And I think a guy like Mekhi Lemon will play right into his strengths as a quarterback. It could really help out. And then you have more of your typical XY receiver in Jerry Jeudy, or it's going to be mostly running those routes on the outside. Like I said, you got to go receiver here. There's a number of different ways you can go. I like Mekhi Lemon. I'll let you talk about the Browns here for just a quick second.
I gave him Denzel Boston. Someone with a little bit of size, a little bit better hands than Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Judy's he's more of a 2 now. I think he's established himself as a 2. I think Denzel Boston has the potential to be a number 1 with the right team, the right system, and a team that doesn't really have a number 1. So he could be a plug and play potentially at a number 1. Denzel Boston, I like the target, big tall guy to go for Shador to throw to.
Yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense, Matt. All right. So next up, the Chicago Bears. This is the team that has got some needs, and they've certainly made a big step forward last year, right? With bringing in Ben Johnson. Caleb Williams seems really hitting his stride. They've got a lot of talent on this team. They just got to kind of find a way to really put it all together and make that run. They seem to be right on the cusp. And so for me, it's all about building up that foundation in front of Caleb Williams. Darnell Wright looked maybe like a bust in year 1. Last year, he took a nice step forward. That tackle they
Yeah.
took out of Tennessee a couple years ago. I think you go to the other side. I think there is a need to upgrade at tackle. So I'm going to go. I've still got Monroe Freeling available here. A huge offensive tackle out of Georgia. He may or may not be, but there should still be a good tackle available. Like I said, that depth is crazy. Again, the Bears, another guy that I really like. Hey, if Dylan Thieneman from Oregon is still there at safety, I think he would really help add some dynamic ability to this defense. Usually I'm along the lines of continuing to create that monster of midway, to continue to usually when Bears mock drafts, I talk about go defense. You need to get that defense great again, especially with all the offensive talent. But I do think this defense already is pretty solid. Dylan, if he's available and they go there, I like the move. I wouldn't disagree with it at all. But I'm going to go with the offensive tackle here and just kind of give Caleb Williams more protection.
I have him taking Peter Woods out of Clemson. Just they need to shore up that. They need to shore up pretty much. They need to strengthen up their defense. They lost a lot of players on defense. Their defense, there was a little bit better. They probably wouldn't have needed overtime against the Rams. They probably could have just beaten the Rams outright. So their defense gave up a lot of big plays all year. They got fortunate in a tough division to win their division. I feel like if they can shore up that front 4, I think that may be a big benefit. Because Peter Woods, I mean, he's a fringe first round pick in my eyes, more of a first 5, 6 picks of the second round type of player. But they're not going to trade up to get a defensive tackle because they need help at a lot of places on the defensive side. So they need all those picks they can get. So you kind of got to reach for a guy like a Peter Woods for teams this good. And this is where you're going to see some reaches towards the end of the first round.
Yeah. Yeah, and you put him aside alongside Grady Jarrett on the interior of the defensive line, and that is kind of what Chicago Bears asked type of pick, right? About creating that monsters of the midway can make sense. And that's not what either with Peter Woods. I mean, one of the things I wrote down too is the Bears definitely could upgrade their edge because like Montez Sweat's kind of their best edge rusher. I know they got Devin Bush as well, who certainly now helps out with that. But yeah, you don't have a dominant edge rusher on that team, and Peter Woods can help you out with that immensely because he's a guy you can also bounce out there and play. So he's one of the more versatile defensive linemen that you're going to find. So I think that the Peter Woods pick would make a lot of sense as well. All right, let's move on to one of your teams, the Buffalo Bills. So, I'll be a little bit shorter with this one, let you go for there. Obviously, big acquisition in the offseason. They traded for DJ Moore. So they kind of got that receiver help. Well, I think there's still a need for some more, pun intended. I think at least with what they've already done, they should be improved. So I think you look elsewhere. I think for Although I will stick with their other receiver, though. I did wanna throw if Denzel Boston's still there because of his size to go along as he'll be such a different presence, I think he would fit so well. It's something that Buffalo doesn't have, that DJ Moore doesn't provide, and that size and that real end zone threat. I think that can make sense, but that's about the only way I would kind of agree with Boston going receiver. I got him going Zion Young, defensive end in Missouri, probably just your best guy available who could help with that pass rush. At Buffalo, they're a team to take like a Peter Woods. I think also that could make some sense. But I'm gonna go Zion Young here, a big guy. I don't like him as much as like a Cassius Howell, who I still have on my board. But I think Cassius Howell's a little bit more of a finesse speed rusher. And I think a guy like Zion Young, who's more of an overpowering type of individual, I think is a little bit better fit for Buffalo.
You could go a couple different directions with Buffalo. If Denzel Boston's there, I'm running that card in right away. But unfortunately, he's not. Anthony Hill Jr. would be a great fit for that, for those back three, the linebackers, the middle three, I should say. And Zion Young, I think, would be a great pick for them too.
Yeah.
I just like Anthony Hill a little bit more, but they do need to. Buffalo didn't lose games because they were bad on offense. Josh Allen's great enough to carry that team to the Super Bowl with practice squad players. That defense is the reason why, because their offense was scoring 30 plus points a game every game, even when they were losing.
Oh,
That defense, if they would have made one extra stop, there's no reason why they couldn't have beat Seattle in the Super Bowl, why they shouldn't have won the Super Bowl this year. The defense is the only reason why they didn't win the Super Bowl this year, get to the Super Bowl type of deal. So Anthony Hill Jr. would be a very good upgrade. It's been a while since they really had a solid linebacker since they let Edmonds walk out the door. I think
yeah.
Anthony Hill would fit that spot really well. If Zion Young is there too, I'd be hell bent not to take him too. They just
Here's the
need
only
to
thing
get the best
I
defensive
agree with it,
player.
and you're absolutely right. I mean, the Bills should go defense. We both have them going that way. Their offense is good enough. Although, like I said, Denzel Boston could make some sense. We both kind of said that if he was there at receiver. But I think if you're the linebacker, there's two of them, right? Anthony Hill and CJ Allen, right? That could be available here in kind of this spot. And especially if they're both available at that point for Buffalo. And I don't know if they will both be, but if they are, and I think there's a solid chance of it. Trade down. Like, you're good enough or you can afford to actually trade back a little bit if you're Buffalo. Let a team come into the first round that's going to want to get back into the first round or get in there for the first time, like maybe a Cincinnati Bengals, and then still probably get Anthony Hill maybe in the early second round or CJ Allen, right? So I think that possibility lies there too. And I think it could be a good move for Buffalo.
I think this is the first potential spot where someone trades up to go for Ty Simpson, possibly.
Yeah, that could be
Get
too.
that
So I
fifth
think if
year
he trades
option.
to gets a value, I would like to see them because I agree with you. I really like Anthony Hill, and I think they could use a linebacker for sure, but I just think it might make sense to trade there. Um, at that point. So let's go to 27, San Francisco 49ers. Obviously a really good team. They've just struggled a bit with health. Still can't quite get over that hurdle of becoming a Super Bowl champion again. They now have acquired Mike Evans to go along with a decent receiver room already. You might only have one more really good year out of Mike Evans. I don't know, one or two. I like the pickup a lot. Same thing with George Kittle. Like, how many more great years out of George Kittle are you going to get? But I still think San Francisco's poised for a really good year, especially if they could hit on a pick. So for me, I'm going to look at them probably addressing the defensive side of the football that I think still has some good players. Fred Warner, Trey Greenlaw, Bosa are guys that are there. I do think with San Francisco, there is a big need to upgrade in the secondary specifically. You could always add another edge rusher for sure because Nick Bosa a little long on the tooth. The other guys that I talked about, they're linebackers, a little bit of a hybrid, but they're not essential line up on the edge and really go after the quarterback. They could use a guy there too, make some sets. But I've still got Dylan Thieneman from Oregon available. And so that's where I went with him. Same thing if it was McNeil Warren. Love both of those guys. Actually, grade McNeil a little bit higher, and I think he would really fit. But I already have him going to our Cowboys at 20. So this is where I go to Dylan. I don't think Dylan will actually be around this long. I would actually see McNeil Warren having probably more of a probability of making it to 27 to San Francisco. But yeah, I like San Francisco addressing that secondary. If both of those safeties are gone, I think they should go with one of the corners that will still be available. If either of those safeties are there, I go safety.
I gave them Caden Brock. I'm surprised he's probably still on my board. I've seen him all over the place,
Yeah, he goes all over the place.
and I feel like Caden Proctor, he's like a boomer bust, very polarizing player. I think he has the talent to be a top 10 pick, but he also has those character questions to where you could see him going in the fourth round type of. He's not going to, but that's the type of player I can see with him right there. Getting a fourth round value in the first round is not what you want to spend your first round pick on necessarily. But I am leaning towards the fact he is going to be a first round pick. And I think a team that needs to shore up that offensive line, Trent Williams is going to probably be around maybe 3 years at the most. And I think if Caden Proctor lives up to a lot of offensive linemen that came from Alabama over the last decade or so, I think he'll be, unless your name is Alex Leatherwood, he's gonna be pretty darn good, I think.
Yeah. So, man, I'm going to approach this a little differently on our next one. We're at 28, the Houston Texans, trying to speed this thing, along a little bit here. So let me actually go ahead on this one and give you a question. Okay, I pose this to you. The Texans were one of the best defenses in the NFL. They might have been the best defense in the AFC last year. I have them going with a defensive player. Would you go defense here at this point in the draft for Houston? Or do you think they need to address specifically maybe the offensive line? Would you go offensive line or would you go defense here for Houston?
I'm going offensive line. Basically gave up everybody.
Yeah. Are you thinking of
Yeah, FOMU out of Utah.
maybe FOMO could still be available at 28?
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I'm not as high on the offensive line class as as I mentioned in the first draft podcast. His offensive line is not. It's not there for me. But
Okay.
I think you're going to get some solid value in the back end of the first round. He could very well easily be gone, but
Yeah.
with how I see the tackle class.
They need to upgrade the left tackle position, very much so. Makes sense by all accounts. I think for me, it was more of that's probably the smart way to go. If Foom was there, 100%, I agree with you. I'd take him. I'm going Anthony Hill Jr., linebacker. I think linebackers, they have great edge rushers. You have Anderson Jr., you have Daniel Hunter, you have Rankins there at defensive tackle. Of course, their cornerback, sorry, was Stingley Jr., one of the best in the game, Lassiter. You go on and on, right? This defense is so built. El Shahir is really good at linebacker, but if there's is there even just trying to find room for them to upgrade on the defense? Maybe the other defensive tackle, if you want to go the Ohio State kid, to put alongside Rankins. But again, that defensive front's already so darn good. You could use, I think, a little bit of an upgrade to go to play along with Shahir, the linebacker position. And that's where I think Anthony Hill or CJ Allen, both of those guys, who's ever there, whoever they like more, you take, makes a lot of sense. All right, let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs. So, of course, they already picked at 9. I here had them going with Jermon McCoy, which might be a little high for some. I think from a tail perspective, it's worth it, but we know the injury concerns there. But I think the Chiefs, I guess I talked about, they can afford to take a risk like that. So I had them going with cornerback and Jermon McCoy. Here, I have them going with Max. I don't even want to say his last name. I'll butcher it. The off the tackle at Arizona State. I think this is a kid who's a big, high risk reward guy. Again, that's why I didn't want to go with him to Houston because I don't think they can afford to miss on an offensive tackle the way that Kansas City could. And this offense is still going to be very, very good in Kansas City, regardless if potentially this doesn't work out for him. But I think Kansas City has the luxury of taking a chance on a guy like this who could come in, who's got the physical traits that looks like he might be a dominant offensive tackle in the NFL. They also could go with another cornerback, right? Like they traded both their cornerbacks away just because they got McCoy doesn't mean they can't come in here now and take another one of these corners that's still likely going to be available from that inch. And you can always add pass rush. You have Chris Jones. He's one of the dominant pass rushers in this league, but he's not a pure off the edge guy either. So they could use someone like that. I understand they've got drawing a blank on his name, Carl Felitis, the Purdue kid, has been pretty good
George Kalafdis.
for them, but I think they could use a real premier edge rusher. So those are kind of my general thoughts on Kansas City there at 29.
I got them going wide receiver. Got to get Mari Cooper or Omar Cooper out of Indiana. He's kind of bouncing all over that back end first round.
Yeah.
I would have preferred a guy like Denzel Boston to give him a little patty, a little bit taller weapon. It'd be nice if Kenyon Sadiq was here to get Travis Kelsey's replacement. I can only imagine what Sadiq would do in that Kansas City's offense,
Mhm.
especially with Eric Bieniemy coming back. That might be one of the more underrated pickups in the offseason is Eric Bieniemy coming back because that's when Chiefs, the Kansas City team,
We're at the best, yeah.
so they were going to Super Bowls without him. Their teams were better with him than they were without him, regardless of the Super Bowls. So I think getting Amari Cooper or gosh, I miss you, Amari Cooper.
Yeah.
Come back to
O
Dallas.
Omar Cooper.
Omar Cooper, wide receiver out of Indiana, will be a solid fit. I think a perfect Kansas City Chief coming from a winning culture with Kurt Signetti at Indiana to a winning culture with Andy Reid at Kansas City. Step right in and be a day one starter, in my opinion.
Yeah, most likely, and I would like that more if they hadn't made the trade for Kenneth Walker, which obviously I love. I'm a huge Canine fan. Because you have Canine to add that dynamic ability and to add his ability as a pass catcher as well to that offense, I think they've kind of addressed that. Not that they still don't need to, and there's not room for improvement there. Of course there is, and Rasheed Rice is just your best. And Xavier Worthy has been okay, but maybe not quite where you were expecting. He's still developing. We'll see where he goes. So I'm more okay with Kansas City working with what they've got. Patrick Mahomes is going to make the most out of it, and that's where I say maybe just go to that offensive line, keep Mahomes, especially coming off an injury, upright. Let's go to number 30, Miami Dolphins, back on the clock. We started with them on today's episode. I had them going offensive line with that pick at there at 11. So here I'm going to go to the other side. I do think we just talked about receivers. Certainly Miami could go into the receiver territory. I mean, who's the best receiver on that team? Tutu Atwell. We talked about
Tutu,
Jalen
yeah.
Tolbert went over there. They've got Malik Washington. It's kind of a collection of two-ish, three-ish, receivers. They certainly don't have that number one. I'm just not sure anybody at 30 is still there that you're worthy of taking it at that situation. If one of those guys has potentially fallen, then sure you could go there. Like I said, we talked about earlier, they've got needs everywhere. I've got them going to cornerback with Chris Johnson out of San Diego State. I don't know if he's a guy that's going to go into the first round, but I really like what I see out of that guy, especially compared to some of these other corners. Um, there's just a real significant need in Miami. The days of Jalen Ramsey are over there. Um, for them to really upgrade that secondary as a whole. So I know that they got the kid from Clemson. I've still got available, and I think he potentially could still be around at this point. But I like Chris Johnson, corner out of San Diego State.
This one's gonna be a head scratcher. I hadn't seen this guy in the first round in any mock drafts, but I something about this kid I like because he's tall. He's tall and lanky. He can get up and high point the football. I got Chris Braswell being a solid late first round pick here out of Tennessee.
Okay, yeah, hitting us with a twist, something out of left field, and those things are going to happen. They always do in the draft. Guys that were not even hearing about in the first, guys we're not even really seeing, in the top like 50 on most of these big boards we're looking at, and all of a sudden, bam, they're getting picked, and sometimes those guys really work out, so it can make sense. All right, now we're to the Super Bowl teams. We talked about them at length of what they did on our previous podcast. Let's go quickly here to the 31 to the New England Patriots. So obviously, good enough team to make the Super Bowl. Offensive line let them down. Drake May looked like a young quarterback, a young, inexperienced quarterback, but it's because his offensive line play wasn't good to him. I think you just kind of have to hope that Will Campbell keeps developing and get better. Like he's shown too much good, and I think the offensive line as a whole, like they played very well most of the year. So I don't think you panic and you go to the offensive line, although they might, and they might add some depth as you talked about. Could always be a benefit in a team struggles like that. But I say, you know what, they could use more help with their pass rush, and that always adds. You're always a tough team to beat. We also have the two best, most important things in the game of football in the NFL is quarterback play and the ability to rush that passer. So I think they should just go get the best rusher left available at this point, and that's Cassius Howell for me out of Texas A&M.
Zion Young. They had to replace Kalavon Chase on. They lost some guys on defense that wanted to go get a bag after a solid Super Bowl run, and Zion Young would be a he'd be a New England Patriot in my eyes.
Yep, 100%. We're both along the same thing. I already have Zion gone, but either way, that totally makes sense. All right, lastly, we're going to get to our Super Bowl champions, the Seattle Seahawks. They were the most complete team in football last year, and that's why they won the Super Bowl. So they have the luxury of really just going with best player probably available. Just really doing that evaluation of who necessarily is still there at 32. I don't think Seattle's a team that needs to get crazy and try to trade up or anything like that. Even though they traded week one away, which I kind of disagree with, there was great depth. Another guy to insert there. Their secondary is still super strong. They have so many legit strengths across the board on this team. Again, it's hard to pick out a weakness. The one thing that I'll touch on is with them trading K9, which I think was a disastrous move. I don't understand it, but it definitely tells us they absolutely. And if you watched last year during the regular season specifically, they value Charbonnet as their number one running back. So along those lines, yes, we don't know the extent of his injury, like as to how quickly his return is going to be. But we're not hearing a lot of talk that he's going to miss the whole season or anything. Eventually, we'll think that he'll come back. So there is a lot of mocks out there and a lot of talk. Hey, they might go get the backup running back from Notre Dame, which I could disagree with more, right? Like, as I've said, don't address a need until it's actually a need. You know what's going to happen if Charbonnet is a little banged up still and they've got questions going to the season. They're not going to go into week one with the running back room the way it is. They're going to go sign a veteran running back. They're going to make a quick trade. They're going to go trade a 6th round pick in for 2 years from now to get some veteran running back that's got a lot of carries in this league. That's a running back 2 or running back 3 on some roster. And they'll be fine to make do until they have Charbonnet back up to full speed. So I don't think that's the direction you go. Instead, I think, hey, again, I talked a little bit about the Houston Texans, a dominant defensive team, right? These might be the best two defenses last year in the NFL, the Seahawks and the Texans. Where can you find maybe a need to upgrade on a great defense? With Houston, it was at linebacker. I think the same thing for Seattle. Go get Anthony Hill or CJ Allen. I have CJ Allen still here and available. So I would go CJ Allen here to the Seahawks, make their defense even more scary, even more dominant. Ernest Jones is back there. He's fantastic. But Duaso and Drake Thomas, I do think you have that potential to go ahead and upgrade one of those guys out, or at least provide some depth there at the linebacker position with getting one of those guys. And I like both of them a lot.
I'm giving him the running back. I'm giving him the running back, Jadarian Price out of Notre Dame. CJ Allen would be good, just to just shore up that defense. But Jadarian Price for me, not everyone is Adrian Peterson and can come back and have a great career after a torn ACL. Shaq Charbonnet hasn't carried the load necessarily because he was split in time. So to have him be that 400 touch guy coming off a torn ACL towards the back end of the season on top of it, when is he actually going to be healthy? Yes, there's probably some veterans on the street that they could pick up that might get cut at the June 1st cut deadline, or maybe a trade in the draft because a running back fell to a team that didn't necessarily need one, but it was an upgrade over what they had type of deal. I just like Price. I think he's probably more of a two, but he wouldn't be there when Seattle picked at two, and the running back class isn't nearly as attractive in the first couple rounds as years pass.
No.
So I think you gotta go and snag a guy like Jadarian Price right now, and 'cause you just don't know with Charbonnet. I think if Charbonnet got hurt week 1 through like 6 or 7, as opposed to the playoffs, maybe not. Be content getting that 3rd or 4th round running back or something like that. But I don't think they can afford to do that, and they need to be able to take some pressure off of Sam Darnold to not have to make all the throws. Get some that you can plug in and play right away. I think Jadarian Price is probably one of the best value picks of the whole entire first round, I think, right here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Zach Charbonnet guy per se. I don't think he's a true number one when he's got to carry the load by himself. So I can understand the move. Also, I just think we haven't got to see much of Price. He was a backup, running back to the number one running back in the country behind one of the top offensive lines in the country. So I think there's still like a lot of question mark. Is Price really a round one type of talent? But I get it because, like I said, I mean, if you're worried about the injury on Charbonnet and maybe you're just also, but again, doesn't matter what we feel. I think the Seahawks have told us that they absolutely see Zach Charbonnet as a true number one back. So that's where,
Yeah,
to
cool.
me, I think there's actually, even if I'm mocking, honestly, I don't think the Seahawks are going to pick a Price with this pick, as a lot of people say they might. I don't think they will, because I think they believe in Charbonnet enough, and they can easily just go out and, like I said, bring in a veteran to come in this season to go along as well until Charbonnet's back up to speed and go draft best player available. But we will see. Certainly could happen. Either way, folks, that's our our first round draft special for the NFL Draft
Oh,
2026 coming to you guys from Pittsburgh tomorrow night. It should be super exciting. Like I said, I think it's going to be crazy to see how all this shakes out. I think there's going to be lots of trades. There's going to be lots of speculation, second guessing, names coming out of nowhere. Fascinating stuff to see where some of these guys go. Very excited for the whole entire draft weekend to see how it all plays out. We will be back for our next episode here. And at some point, probably to recap it a bit and get back into the swing of things. We thank everyone who's been listening. We thank everyone who listens to this episode, who's taking to our content, gets some enjoyment out of it. Um, o- Overall, we just want you all to be able to sit back and enjoy this 2026 NFL draft. Happy drafting, you all. This is the Undrafted Podcast. Have a good one.